Little girl lost in a mall but found by her dad's ex-girlfriend, who abandoned her years back. The anchor. The air inside the Silverbird Galleria was a carefully manufactured coolness, a crisp, dry breath that smelled faintly of polished marble and the sweet, distant promise of cinnamon from the bakery on the upper floor. It was a fortress against the Lagos outside, where the afternoon sun pressed down like a physical weight, and the air buzzed with the relentless symphony of horns, generators, and hawkers' cries. Kola Adesina walked through the gleaming atrium, a man completely at ease in his own skin. His tailored navy blue linen shirt didn't stick to his back, his tan trousers had a sharp crease, and his leather sandals were quiet and confident on the floor. But his true anchor, the center of his gravitational pull, was the small, warm hand firmly wrapped around his index finger. 4-year-old Zara matched his steps with a determined little squeak from her new pink sandals. Her head, a masterpiece of intricate braids beaded with tiny blue and yellow balls, barely reached his hip. She was a whirlwind of quiet observation, her wide, liquid brown eyes taking in the towering displays of televisions showing music videos, the rainbow wall of sneakers in a sports shop, the dizzying sparkle of a jewelry kiosk. "Daddy," she said, her voice a soft pip in the cavernous space. She tugged his hand, stopping him. He looked down, his stern businessman's face instantly melting into an expression of pure, undiluted devotion. "Yes, Omomi." "Ice cream." The question was posed with a hope so profound it wrinkled her small nose. "The chocolate one, with the sprinkles." She savored the English word, a recent and prized addition to her vocabulary. Kola chuckled, a rich, warm sound. He squatted down to her level, his knees popping slightly, a reminder of long nights on concrete floors in another life. He brushed a thumb over her cheek. "After we get your new school shoes, my love. A promise. First, we conquer Bada." She considered this, her small face a canvas of serious negotiation. "2 sprinkles. 2 sprinkles," he confirmed solemnly, sealing the pact. He stood up, her hand automatically finding his again. As they walked towards the children's shoe store, Kola's gaze swept over them all, not with the anxious, overwhelmed glance of his past, but with the calm appraisal of a man who belonged. He remembered a time when the price of a single ice cream cone could have been a day's meal, when the very idea of this mall, with its imported goods and filtered air, was a universe away from his reality. Zara was chattering now about her friend Chisholm in school, about a butterfly she had seen, about the color of the shoes she wanted, red, Daddy, but a shiny red, like a ladybug. Her voice was the melody to the percussion of his heartbeat. Every word from her was a miracle. He listened intently, nodding, asking questions, because to him, her thoughts were the most important news in the world. This ease, this quiet joy, was hard-won. It was excavated from the depths of a despair so complete it had once threatened to swallow him whole. Zara, bouncing lightly on her toes as they passed a toy store, was unaware that she was both the cause of that ancient sorrow and the architect of this profound peace. She was his living, breathing redemption. He paused by a fountain, its water dancing under colored lights. "Look, Zara," he said, pointing. "See how the water jumps." She watched, mesmerized for a moment, then leaned her head against his arm. "It's pretty, but I like the sea better. It's bigger, and it has your boats." Kola's heart swelled. His boats, 2 modest sand dredgers he part-owned, an investment that had come after the real estate windfall. She simplified his world, distilled his struggles and successes into concepts she could love. Ice cream with sprinkles, water that jumped, Daddy's boats. "Yes," he said softly, his voice thick with an emotion he never tried to hide from her. "The sea is bigger. Now, let's go find those ladybug shoes before they all fly away." As they moved on, Zara's secure grip on his finger was more than just physical. It was the tether that held his soul to the earth, the anchor that had steadied him through every storm. In this temple of commerce, surrounded by symbols of the wealth he now possessed, Kola knew with absolute certainty that the only true treasure he had ever needed was walking beside him, her small sandals squeaking a happy rhythm on the polished floor, already dreaming of chocolate and sprinkles. Echoes in a cramped room. For years earlier, in a universe contained within 4 peeling walls in Suralire, the air was not cool. It was a thick, soupy presence, heavy with the smell of kerosene from the stove, mildewed cement, and the sweet, sharp scent of a newborn. A single, sluggish ceiling fan chopped at the humidity, its rhythmic thwup 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 doing little more than stirring the heat from one corner of the room to another. Zara, swaddled in a cheap, threadbare pink blanket, slept in a plastic washing basin that served as her crib. Her chest rose and fell with the terrifying fragility of a baby bird. Kola, seated on a low stool beside her, couldn't stop looking. Exhaustion carved deep lines into his 25-year-old face, but his eyes shone with a wonder that bordered on delirium. He was mesmerized by the miniature perfection of her fingernails, the dark, damp curls stuck to her forehead, the occasional, tiny sigh that escaped her lips. She was here. She was real. Across the small room, perched on the edge of the single bed that took up most of the floor space, was Amara. She was beautiful in a way that seemed to reject its surroundings. Her skin, even after the ordeal of childbirth, glowed with a health that defiance alone couldn't explain. She wore a simple Ankara wrapper, but she wore it like a queen in exile. She was not looking at the baby. Her gaze was fixed on the cracked lino floor, but Kola knew she was seeing far beyond it. Amara, Kola whispered, breaking the fan's monotonous rhythm. His voice was raw, scraped thin from hours of coaching, pleading, cheering in the chaotic maternity ward. Come see. She's dreaming. See her eyes moving under her lids. Amara's own eyes, when she finally lifted them, were not windows to joy but to a cold, hard calculation. They swept over the scene. The basin crib, the single pot of OG cooling on the stove, the patch of darker cement on the wall where the roof leaked during the rainy season. They finally landed on Kola, on his faded secondhand shirt, on the desperate hope blazing in his face. Kola, she said, and her voice was flat, a stone dropped into still water. Look around. He didn't want to. He wanted to live in the bubble of this miracle. She is beautiful. We made her. Look at her, Baiko. What will we feed her? Amara asked, the question ablaze. Your salary from that bank security work finished 2 days ago. That OG is from my neighbor's pity. Pity, Kola. He flinched but held his ground. He had been holding this ground for 9 months. We will manage. God will help us. I will work more hours. I will. God. Her laugh was a short, harsh crack, like splitting wood. It made the baby stir. Which God is in this room? The God of Gary and Groundnut. The God of one-room and parlor with cockroaches for tenants. She stood up, her movement sudden, causing the bed springs to shriek. She began to pace, 2 steps each way, in the tiny space. I told you. From the beginning, I told you my dreams. Did you see me in this? She gestured violently at the room. I wanted to marry a man with a future. A man who could take me to Lagos Oriental for dinner. Not one who counts Kobo for Okada fare. Her words were familiar, a terrible liturgy they had recited throughout her pregnancy. The pregnancy that had begun with a hesitant hope, but had quickly become an anchor dragging them deeper into poverty. Kola's promised promotion had evaporated. Sickness had stolen his extra driving jobs. Each month had been a progressively more desperate arithmetic of survival. Her beauty, which he had once thought was for him, had become a torment, a visible symbol of everything she was losing, everything he could not give her. He knelt now, not in prayer, but in supplication before her. He reached for her hand, but she snatched it away as if his touch burned. Amara, please. See how beautiful she is, he pleaded, his eyes darting to the sleeping baby. This is our blessing. Things will change. I feel it. We will plan our marriage, a small one, just us and marriage. She spat the word. Marriage to what? To this suffering? No. She walked to a small, frayed suitcase already packed and sitting by the door. The finality of its presence finally pierced Kola's bubble of joy. His breath hitched. Where are you going? I am leaving her with you. She did not look at the basin. You begged me to keep her. You said you would carry the responsibility. So carry it. The world seemed to drain of sound, leaving only the thwup 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 of the useless fan. Cold dread, colder than he had ever known, seeped into Kola's bones. You can't. She needs her mother. Amara, Baiko knew. I am begging you. On my life, I will make it better. Tears were streaming down his face now, but they seemed to only harden her resolve. She looked at him, and for a fleeting second, something flickered in her eyes. Not love, perhaps, but a pang of recognition for the pain she was causing. It was gone as quickly as it came, smothered by a thicker, more potent emotion, self-preservation. She is yours, Amara said, her voice now eerily calm, the storm having passed and left desolation in its wake. I am starting my life afresh. A clean start. She picked up the suitcase. The click of the latch was as loud as a gunshot. Kola scrambled to his feet, his legs weak. He stood between her and the door, a broken barrier. Don't do this. Please. For Zara. We named her together. At the mention of the name, Amara's jaw tightened. She sidestepped him, her perfume, a cheap, sweet jasmine, a cruel mockery in the stifling room. She opened the door. The hallway's stagnant air rushed in. Goodbye, Kola. And she was gone. The click of the closing door was a different sound. It was a seal. It was the sound of a world having. Silence descended, profound and screaming. The fan's thwop 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 was now a taunt. Then, a small, hungry mule came from the basin. Zara was awake. Kola stood frozen, staring at the blank wood of the door, the echo of Amara's final words ringing in the hollowed-out chamber of his chest. The baby's cry grew more insistent, a raw, living demand in the ruins of his heart. Slowly, mechanically, he turned. He looked at his daughter, her face now screwed up, turning red. The anchor had been dropped. It had dragged him to the bottom of the ocean. But as he stumbled toward her, as he gathered her impossibly small, warm body into his trembling arms, a strange, new current began to stir in the depths. Despair so complete it had no bottom. And from that absolute zero, a single, fierce, unbreakable resolve began to crystallize. He held Zara close, her cries muffled against his shirt. It's just you and me now, he whispered into the fine, dark hair on her head, his tears falling onto her blanket. Just you and me. The words were a lament, and in the same breath, a vow. The click of the door. The silence after the click of the door was not empty. It was a dense, living thing. It pressed in on Kola's eardrums, heavier than the humidity, filled with the ghost echo of her final words and the sharp, sweet scent of jasmine that lingered like a taunt. For a long, suspended moment, he could not move. He was a statue of ruin, staring at the flaking green paint on the door, willing it to open again, for her to walk back in and say it was a cruel joke. But the only movement was the slow, useless thwop 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 of the fan blade, stirring the same defeated air. Then, the sound that shattered the trance, Zara's cry. It was no longer a sleepy mule but a full-throated, indignant wail of hunger and need. It was a sound utterly present, violently alive, and it yanked Kola from the precipice of catatonia. He turned. His limbs felt like they were made of wet clay. The 3 steps to the plastic basin were a marathon. He looked down at her. Her tiny face was contorted, a red, furious knot of life demanding its due. In that instant, the sheer helplessness of her, and of him, was paralyzing. He had no idea what to do. The OG was too thin. He had no money for formula. He was a security guard who couldn't even secure milk for his own child. A wave of pure, unadulterated panic rose in his throat, bitter and choking. He was going to fail. She was going to starve in this hot, little room because of his poverty, because of his naive belief that love was enough. Amara's last, cruel laugh echoed in his head. Which god is in this room? He reached into the basin, his large, calloused hands looking monstrously clumsy next to her fragility. As he lifted her, the warmth of her small body seeped through the blanket into his palms. She was so light, yet her cries held the weight of the world. He brought her to his chest, cradling her, rocking awkwardly from foot to foot. Shoo, omomi. Shoo, Zara. Daddy is here. His voice was a broken tremor. The words felt like a lie. What good was here if here was nothing? He paced the tiny room, the 2 steps Amara had taken now his prison yard. Her suitcase was gone, but her presence was everywhere. A hairpin on the ledge, the faint impression of her body on the mattress, the empty space in the small cupboard where her few good clothes had hung. Each one was a fresh puncture wound. He had loved her. He had believed, foolishly, that the baby would bind her to him, to them. Instead, it had been the final thread she snipped. Zara's cries began to subside into hiccuping sobs against his shoulder, soothed less by his ineffective rocking and more by the simple, solid beat of his heart. He sank onto the edge of the bed, the springs groaning in sympathy. He looked at her. Her eyes, squeezed shut, now slowly opened. They were a deep, dark brown, still cloudy with newborn unknowing, but they seemed to look right at him. A tiny, perfect hand escaped the swaddle and waved, fingers splaying before curling into a fist that came to rest against his collarbone. In that quieting moment, something broke open inside Kola. It wasn't a dramatic snap, but a slow, painful fissure. The part of him that had been Amara's, the part that had dreamed with her, hoped with her, that had defined itself as her man, that part crumbled into dust. It was excruciating, a loss as physical as an amputation. But from that raw, bleeding space, something else began to flow. It was cold at first, a trickle of hardened resolve. Then it warmed, fed by the tiny heartbeat against his own. It was a fierce, primal, and terrifying new love, stripped of all romance, purged of any expectation of reciprocation. It was the love of a lone guardian for his charge. It was absolute responsibility. The click of the door had been a closing. But it was also, he realized with a clarity that cut through the pain, a starting gun. He was all she had. And he understood as her fist uncurled and her tiny fingers brushed his skin, she was all he had. The despair didn't vanish. It simply found its container. It was poured into the mold of this new purpose. He would not just survive for her. He would conquer for her. Every insult, every hardship, every hungry night would be fuel. He bent his head and kissed her forehead, a solemn pledge. "It's you and me, Zara," he whispered again, but the tremor was gone. The words were no longer a lament. They were a covenant, spoken in the silent, sacred chapel of their hot, cramped room. "You and me against the world. I will make it better. I swear it to you." Outside, the relentless Lagos evening carried on. The shouts of suya sellers, the blare of music from a nearby bar, the groan of traffic. Life, indifferent and bustling, moved forward. Inside, a new life, fragile and fierce, had truly begun. A father was born in the ashes of a broken man, and his entire universe now rested, breathing softly, in the crook of his arm. Sweat and soil. The world became a blur of shifts. Kola's existence narrowed to a tunnel with 2 points of light, Zara's face and the next Naira note. The days bled into nights, a relentless cycle of sweat and exhaustion. His primary job as a security guard at the bank, once a source of quiet shame for its monotony, became his bedrock. He wore the ill-fitting uniform with a new gravity, standing sentry through the long, quiet nights, his mind racing with calculations. How many tins of formula? How many packets of diapers? How much for the milk-rich Akamu the market women said was good for babies? The day shift belonged to Zara and to hustling. He became a ghost driver for a wealthy businessman in Ikoyi, his old, rattling car a chariot for whispered phone deals and hurried men in suits. He dropped off packages for a printing press in Yaba. He queued for hours to pay bills for elderly neighbors for a small fee. Every errand, no matter how small, was a brick towards the fragile fortress he was building for his daughter. Zara was his passenger, his tiny co-pilot in survival. She spent her days strapped to his back in a faded Ankara wrapper, or dozing on a makeshift bed of clothes in the passenger seat of the car as he drove. She learned to sleep through the blare of Lagos horns and to wake to the gentle sway of his walk. Her world was the smell of his sweat, the sound of his voice, soothing, apologetic, constantly whispering plans to her sleeping form. "We go manage, Omomi. Just small time. Things go better." But things were desperate. The money was a leaky bucket. One bout of fever for Zara, treated with panic and the last of his savings at a chemist, would wipe out a week's hustling. The one-room apartment grew hotter, more oppressive. He sold his few valuables, a wristwatch from his father, a small television. He ate once a day, often just Gary, so that the more expensive tin milk and golden morn could go to Zara. He became a master of stretching everything. A single diaper, a cup of formula, his own endurance. One afternoon, after a grueling double shift, he sat in his parked car outside a client's house in Acadia GRA. Zara, now 6 months old, was fretting in her makeshift seat. He was hollow with fatigue, his vision swimming. The client, Alhaji Danjuma, a portly man with kind eyes, emerged from his gate. He peered into the car. "Kola, my friend. You day here since?" "Yes, sir. Just resting small," Kola said, quickly wiping the exhaustion from his face. Alhaji Danjuma's gaze fell on Zara. "This is the Pekin? The one way her mama." Kola nodded, a tight, painful movement. The Alhaji was silent for a moment. "You are a strong man. A good father." He leaned in, his voice dropping. You day save money? Kola almost laughed. The sound came out as a dry cough. Small, sir. For Pekin milk. Alhaji Danjuma shook his head. Milk finish for mouth. You need something Wago feed the two of you for future. He looked around, then back at Kola. Listen, my brother is a surveyor. Government is planning a new road, a new scheme. The land for a Jaleki, by the water. Now bush. People day sell, and for chicken change. In 5 years, 7 years, ego be gold. Land. Kola's mind, fogged with tiredness, couldn't grasp it. Land was for rich men, for men like Alhaji. Sir, I know get such money. You get your strength. You get your determination. The Alhaji passed a folded Naira note through the window, far more than his driving fee. Nobi dash. Naseed. Go there next week on your off day. Find plot number 47B. The owner day desperate to sell. Talk him down. Use this as deposit. Pay the rest small. Even if not one plot. Plant your foot for that sand. He patted the roof of the car and walked away. Kola stared at the money in his hand. It felt alien, dangerous. It was a week's worth of food, of security. To throw it into sand and bush felt like madness. Zara let out a soft coo. He looked at her. She was watching him, her big brown eyes calm. In them, he didn't see the next meal. He saw a future. He saw a school uniform. A bedroom with a window. A life that wasn't this desperate scramble from sunrise to sunset. The next Sunday, with Zara strapped to his back, he took 2 buses and a bumpy Okada ride to the end of the known world. Ibejaleki was exactly as described. Vast stretches of scrubland, sandy paths, the distant, salty smell of the lagoon. Mosquitoes whined. It felt like nowhere. He found the marker for plot 47B. It was just a patch of earth, dotted with tough grass and a single, gnarled tree. He stood there, Zara a warm weight against his spine. He imagined a road here, a house, a garden for her to play in. The vision was so faint, so implausible, it was almost pathetic. But as he turned to leave, the late afternoon sun broke through the clouds, painting the sandy soil a sudden, dazzling gold. It was a sign, he decided. A foolish, desperate man's sign, but he clung to it. He met the owner, a weary old man who wanted to move to the village. They haggled. Kola used every persuasive skill he had. Speaking of his daughter, his hope. He placed Alhaji Danjuma's seed money into the man's wrinkled hand. The rest would be paid in agonizing monthly installments that would mean even less food, even more hustling. That evening, back in the hot room, Zara fed hungrily from her bottle. Kola sat on the floor, a map of the plot spread before him, a single kerosene lamp casting long shadows. The deed, a fragile piece of paper, was the most valuable thing he owned. He touched the soil-stained corner of the map, then reached out and stroked Zara's downy head. "This is for you," he whispered, his voice thick with a new kind of fear. Not the fear of starvation, but the terrifying fear of hope. "We are planting something here, my love. In the sand. We are planting our tomorrow." Hotcakes. The plot of sand in Abejaleki was not just a piece of paper. It was an altar where Kola sacrificed his present. The monthly installments were a wolf at the door, hungrier than any he'd known before. He took on a night watchman job at a construction site, his existence a dizzying carousel of the bank's cool marble lobby, the stuffy interior of his taxi, and the dusty, exposed skeleton of a half-built office block. Sleep became a currency he couldn't afford. He'd catnap with Zara strapped to his chest, her rhythmic breathing the only lullaby he knew. Zara grew from a fragile infant into a sturdy, observant toddler in this crucible of exhaustion. Her first steps were taken not on a soft rug, but on the cracked linoleum of their room, her tiny hands gripping his calloused fingers for balance. Her first word was not "mama," but "dada," uttered one dawn as he stumbled in, reeking of concrete dust, and her face lit up as if he were the sun itself. That word, "dada," became his sustenance, more potent than any food. The seasons turned. The harmattan winds blew fine dust from the Sahara through the cracks in their window. Then the rains came, and the patch on the wall darkened, a persistent dampness that made Zara cough. Through it all, the payments to the old man in the village went out, a trickle of hope leaching from Kola's veins. Then a whisper. It started among the drivers and touts at the motor park. Government Don Sinam. Road day come for that lucky side. Kola's heart, a weary muscle, gave a tentative thump. He took a rare day off, borrowed a better motorcycle, and went back to plot 47B. The change was subtle but seismic. Where there had been only bush paths, now there were freshly graded red earth tracks, like raw wounds on the landscape. A few bold speculators had erected billboards with grandiose names: Lagoon View Estates, Future City. His patch of sand was still just sand, but it no longer felt like the end of the world. It felt like the edge of something. He stood there, the motorcycle engine ticking as it cooled, and for the first time, he didn't just see a plot. He saw a boundary. He saw frontage. Alhaji Danjuma's words echoed. Plant your foot for that sand. His foot was planted. Now he had to build on it. Selling it was the obvious, sensible thing. He could get triple what he'd paid, clear his debts, breathe easier. He stood at the crossroads, the wind ruffling his threadbare shirt. He thought of Zara's cough, of the single, bare light bulb in their room, of the relentless, grinding fear. The temptation to cash out was a sweet, seductive song. But he also thought of the map under the kerosene lamp, of planting it tomorrow. He thought of being a landlord, not a tenant, of roots, not just survival. He went to Alhaji Danjuma, not for money, but for advice. The older man listened, sipping his zobo. If you sell now, you eat today, he said finally. If you hold, if you can even find small money to put fence, just simple sandcrete block, to mark him as serious property, then you no go sell plot. You go sell future. And future, he said, tapping the side of his nose, nah hot cake. Hot cake. The phrase ignited something in Kola. He didn't just want to eat today. He wanted a bakery. The next 18 months were a sleepless delirium of work. He became a phantom, existing on the very edge of his strength. He took a high-interest loan from a ruthless Isuzu group, the collectors a monthly terror. With the money, he put a basic block fence around 47B. It wasn't much, but it transformed the plot from a vague piece of earth into a property. It declared intention. And then, the dam broke. The government road project was officially launched. A major bank announced plans for a branch. A popular pastor acquired a vast swathe of land for a new city church. Ibe Jaleki was no longer a whispered rumor. It was a headline, a gold rush. Kola's phone, a battered old button model, began to ring with unfamiliar numbers. Is this Mr. Adesina, the owner of 47B along the new radial road? The first offer made his knees weak. It was 5 times his total investment. He refused, his voice trembling only slightly. The offers climbed. Each refusal was an act of faith that strained every nerve. Zara, now a chatterbox of 3, would play with her plastic toys at his feet as he negotiated, her innocent babbling a stark counterpoint to the life-changing sums being discussed over crackling lines. Finally, an offer came from a developer wanting to consolidate land for a gated community of townhouses. The number was astronomical. It was freedom. It was a future written in bold, clear digits. This time, he said yes. The signing happened in a cool, glass-walled lawyer's office in Victoria Island. When Kola placed his signature on the thick stack of documents, the pen didn't shake. He felt a surreal calm. The money hit his account, and he stared at the balance on the bank manager's computer screen, not with elation, but with a profound, quiet numbness. The wolf was not just gone from the door. The entire forest had been purchased. His first act was not celebration. It was liquidation. He paid off the Isuzu loan with a grim satisfaction. He bought a modest, clean 2-bedroom flat in a safe part of Suralire, a place with running water, constant electricity from a humming inverter, and a window in Zara's room that looked out at a tree. He bought her a real bed shaped like a princess carriage. He bought 2 more plots of land, this time with cash. Then a small dredging boat, partnering with a taciturn Ijaw man who knew the waterways. The money, carefully managed, began to breed. But the greatest transformation wasn't in his bank account or his address. It was in his shoulders. The permanent hunch of anxiety began to ease. The crease of constant worry between his brows softened. He could breathe, deeply and without pain, for the first time since the click of that door. One evening, in their new sitting room, Zara climbed into his lap, smelling of soap and crayons. She pointed a chubby finger at a framed photo on the wall, the only one he had of them, a blurry snap from a street photographer. That's me and Dada, she stated. Yes, my love, he said, kissing her hair. We live here now? She asked, though she knew the answer. We live here now, he confirmed, his voice a low rumble of pure contentment. She looked around the room, at the steady glow of the bulb, at the fans circulating cool, dry air. "It's nice," she declared, with the simple authority of a child. Then she snuggled closer. "I like it." Cola held her, looking at the photo of their former, harder life. The plot of sand had been a hot cake, indeed. But as he felt the steady, trusting weight of his daughter in his arms, he knew the true wealth hadn't been in the sale. It had been in the faith to plant the seed, and in the little girl whose future had been the only soil rich enough to make it grow. The blessings had come, and they wore tiny socks and asked for ice cream with sprinkles. A mall and a melody. The new normality was a melody Cola never tired of hearing. It was the hum of the inverter kicking in, a sound that meant light and cooling air would continue uninterrupted. It was the gentle gurgle of the water heater in the bathroom, a luxury that still felt vaguely miraculous. It was the sound of Zara's laughter, bouncing off walls that were painted, not peeling. This particular Saturday morning, the melody was especially sweet. Zara, now 4, stood on a stool in her princess bedroom, critically assessing 2 hair ribbons held up by Mrs. Chitty, the warm, efficient nanny who came weekdays. "The yellow one, Auntie. It matches my sandals." Her diction was precise, a blend of her preschool English and the Yoruba lilt she inherited from him. Cola leaned in the doorway, a cup of tea in hand, watching. His daughter was a vision in a denim pinafore over a bright white blouse, her hair intricately braided and beaded from the previous day's visit to Auntie Kemi's salon. She was a confident little queen of her small domain. "The Galleria awaits, oh," Mrs. Chitty announced, tying the ribbon with a flourish. "You will be the finest girl there." "We're just getting shoes, Mrs. Chitty," Cola said, smiling. "But thank you. Shoes are important," Zara declared, hopping off the stool. "They have to be shiny. For school." The drive to the Silverbird Galleria was part of the adventure. Zara chattered from her booster seat in the back of the new, modest SUV, pointing out landmarks. "Daddy, look. Your boat office." She pointed to the small storefront with the sign, Adesina and iJaw Dredging Services. He nodded, pride a warm knot in his chest. As they stepped into the mall's grand atrium, the cool, conditioned air was a familiar embrace. The space was a symphony of polished surfaces, muted chatter, and the distant, enticing thump of music from a gadget store. Zara's small hand slipped into his, her grip firm and trusting. This was their ritual. The leisurely Saturday walk, the window shopping, the negotiation for a treat. It was a world away from the desperate errands of her infancy. Now they strolled. "Daddy, look at the giant TV," she whispered, awestruck by a wall of screens showing a vibrant music video. "Is that Burna Boy?" "I think so." "Yes," he murmured, amused by her pop culture knowledge, gleaned from Mrs. Chitty and the school run. They passed a sports store, a wall of sneakers like a rainbow waterfall. A jewelry kiosk glittered under pinpoint lights, and Zara paused, not out of desire, but simple fascination. "It's like stars, Daddy." He squeezed her hand. "One day, I'll buy you stars." She looked up at him, her brown eyes serious. "I don't need stars. I have you." The simple, profound statement stole his breath for a second. He swallowed the sudden emotion and cleared his throat. "Well, today, we have bata. And then, maybe ice cream." Her eyes widened, the negotiation beginning. "Ice cream? The chocolate one? With the sprinkles?" She savored the English word, a recent and prized acquisition. He chuckled, the rich, easy sound echoing slightly in the atrium. He crouched down, his knees giving a familiar, faint pop, a tiny echo from all those nights on hard floors. He was eye level with her world. "After we get your new school shoes, my love. A promise. First, we conquer bata." He saw the wheels turning in her head, the serious business of assessing the terms. Her small face was a canvas of intense consideration. Finally, she extended a tiny finger. 2 sprinkles. The gravity of the request made him want to smile, but he matched her solemnity. He hooked his pinky with hers. 2 sprinkles. A covenant. The deal sealed. She beamed, her whole face lighting up. As they walked on, her sandals emitted a cheerful squeak-squeak on the polished marble, a percussive beat to the mall's muzak. She launched into a story about her friend Chisholm at school, about a butterfly that had landed on their classroom window, about the exact shade of red she desired for her shoes. "Not fire engine red, Daddy. Ladybug red. Shiny." He listened, truly listened, because her thoughts were the most captivating narrative he knew. Her voice, bright and clear, was the melody that had replaced the old, fearful silence of their lives. It filled the spacious mall, filled him. They paused by the central fountain, water arcing gracefully under colored lights. "Look, Zara," he said, pointing. "See how the water dances?" She watched, silent for a moment, mesmerized by the liquid choreography. Then she leaned her head against his arm, a gesture of pure, unthinking affection. "It's pretty," she conceded, "but I like the lagoon better. It's bigger, and it has your boats." Your boats. Not the struggle, not the dredgers as assets, but as part of her landscape, her father's domain. She simplified his universe, distilled his past battles and present peace into concepts she could love. Ice cream with sprinkles, dancing water, daddy's boats on the big lagoon. His heart, so carefully fortified, swelled with a love so fierce it was almost painful. "Yes," he said, his voice suddenly thick. He straightened, pulling her gently closer. "The lagoon is bigger. Now, let's go find those ladybug shoes before they all fly away." Her hand in his was more than an anchor now. It was a compass, pointing always toward joy. In this temple of commerce, surrounded by the tangible proofs of his success, Kola knew with a certainty that vibrated in his very bones that the only wealth that mattered was walking beside him, her small hand warm in his, already dreaming of chocolate and the triumphant acquisition of 2 sprinkles. The melody of their life was playing, and it was perfect. The turn back. The shoe shopping had been a triumph. After much solemn deliberation in front of a mirror, Zara had selected a pair of Mary Janes that were, indeed, a perfect, shiny ladybug red. She had marched up and down the aisle of Bata, the stiff new soles making a satisfying tap-tap on the tile, her face a portrait of grave importance. Kola had watched, his phone forgotten in his pocket, the world narrowed to her pride. They were weaving their way back through the Galleria's main concourse, the victory of the shoes making their steps lighter. Zara swung their clasped hands, her other hand clutching the glossy bag that held the old sandals. The promise of ice cream hung in the air, sweet and imminent. "So, we go for the sprinkles first, or the chocolate first?" she was asking, a complex logistical puzzle for a 4-year-old gourmand. "The chocolate is the foundation, Omo me," Kola instructed playfully. "Then you build the sprinkles on top. Like a house." She nodded, absorbing this wisdom. "So the sprinkles are the roof?" "Exactly. A very colorful, crunchy roof." Her laughter was a bright, clear bell, cut through by a booming voice that seemed to originate from directly beside them. "Kola, Omo, wedding day happen. Is this you?" Kola turned, a smile of genuine surprise already forming. It was Mr. Bello, his former supervisor from the bank, a man whose belly had grown even more impressive, his signature thick mustache now streaked with gray. He clapped a heavy hand on Kola's shoulder, the force of it a familiar, almost comforting jolt. "Mr. Bello." "Sir." "Long time." Kola's grip on Zara's hand loosened, just for a second, as he moved to clasp the older man's hand in a warm, two-handed shake. It was an automatic gesture of respect. "Long time no see at all. And see you now." Mr. Bello's eyes, sharp and assessing even in his joviality, scanned Kola's well-tailored shirt, his good watch. "People are talking the once-upon-a-time security guard who now owns half of Lecky. I hear say you don become landlord for big boys." "Not true." Kola laughed, a modest, deflecting sound. He was conscious of Zara beside him, but Mr. Bello was pulling him slightly into the flow of pedestrian traffic, forcing a small, instinctive step away from the spot where Zara stood. "Ah, sir, people day exaggerate. God has just been faithful small. Faithful co. Not you faithful." Mr. Bello boomed, drawing glances from other shoppers. "To carry your Pekin alone like that after that yay girl run away. I hear the story. And see now. Look at God." The mention of Amara, so casual and public, sent a faint, old chill down Kola's spine. He didn't want this conversation here. Now? He started to half-turn, to reach back for Zara's hand, to extract himself. But Mr. Bello was in a nostalgic groove. "Remember that night the ATM catch fire for Branch? You and me and that small extinguisher, Che." Kola's attention split. One part of him was back in that panicked night, the smell of melting plastic. The other part, the father part, was sending a silent signal to his daughter. "Hold on, just a second." A sea of strangers. For Zara, The world had become a forest of legs. Trouser legs, skirt hems, colorful Ankara prints, and bare calves flashed past, a confusing, endless parade. The polished floor, which had been so shiny and fun, now stretched in every direction, vast and terrifying. The ceiling, with its distant lights, felt like a cold, fake sky. The initial cold flutter in her tummy had solidified into a hard, icy ball of fear. She stood frozen for a moment, her new red shoes rooted to the spot, the bag a dead weight in her clenched fist. "Daddy." Her voice was a whisper, stolen by the whoosh of air conditioning and the rumble of distant conversation. She took a hesitant step, then another. Her head barely reached the hips of the adults streaming around her. She was a small boat adrift in a churning sea. A man carrying 3 shopping bags almost bumped into her, muttering an absent-minded sorry without looking down. The near miss made her stumble back, her breath hitching. "Find a place." Daddy's voice was in her head, but it was fuzzy, a lesson from a safe time. "If you get lost, stay where you are." But where was she? This wasn't a place. It was an everywhere and a nowhere. The giant teddy bear was gone from view, its blue fur swallowed by the crowd. The fountain was just a distant sound of splashing. Tears welled up, hot and blurring. The colorful store signs melted into smears of light. A sob escaped her, a small, wounded sound. She began to walk, not with purpose, but with the desperate hope that the next step would bring her back to the safe circle of her father's shadow. She passed a store smelling strongly of new leather. Another blasted cold air and pop music. Every face she looked up at was unfamiliar, intent on its own destination. Some smiled vaguely, but their eyes slid over her, not seeing her, just a small child in the way. The panic rose, tightening her chest. She wanted to scream, but the sound seemed stuck, a lump of cold let in her throat. She thought of the ice cream, the chocolate, the 2 sprinkles. The promise felt like a dream from 1,000 years ago. Now there was only this, the overwhelming noise, the towering strangers, the crushing loneliness. She found herself in a slightly quieter corridor leading to the bathrooms. A kind-looking woman in a uniform was mopping the floor. Zara approached, a flicker of hope sparking. "Auntie," she squeaked. The woman looked down, her expression weary. "Yes, Pekin, your mama for toilet." Zara shook her head, the tears finally spilling over. "I can't find my daddy." The woman's face softened with pity, but she glanced at her watch. "Uh-huh. You know follow am. Wait here small. Your daddy go come find you." She went back to mopping, assuming a parent was nearby. But waiting felt impossible. The silence in the corridor was worse. It let the scary thoughts in. What if daddy had left? What if he couldn't find her? What if, like the shadowy, never discussed before, she was alone? She backed away from the cleaner and stumbled back into the main thoroughfare. The crowd seemed denser, more threatening. She was thirsty. The new shoes, so beloved an hour ago, now pinched her toes. She was a tiny island of misery in a river of oblivious happiness. Then, she remembered another piece of Daddy's teaching, his voice clearer this time, spoken during a walk on their street. "If you can't stay, find a mummy. A mummy with a kind face. Tell her you're lost. A mummy. Not just any auntie. A mummy." Zara wiped her wet cheeks with the back of her hand, smearing the tears. She had to look. She had to find a kind face. She started scanning the faces again, not just looking for Daddy, but for her. A face that looked like it could tell a story, that could give a hug, that wouldn't just mop and walk away. She passed young women laughing with friends. She passed stern-looking women talking on phones. She passed grandmothers focused on grandchildren of their own. Her little heart hammered, a frantic bird in a cage of bones. The sea of strangers was endless. She was so small. She was about to give up, to curl into a ball right there on the floor, when her gaze landed on a woman standing alone by a glittering kiosk. The woman was pretty, very pretty. She was looking at a necklace, but she wasn't smiling. She looked sad. There was a tiredness around her eyes, a stillness to her posture that was different from the rushing crowd. And something else, something in the curve of her cheek, the slope of her nose, it was a whisper of a feeling, a faint, familiar echo that resonated deep in Zara's lost, lonely heart. It wasn't Daddy, but it wasn't a stranger either. Not quite. Gathering every ounce of her 4-year-old courage, Zara took a deep, shaky breath. She smoothed down her pinafore. Then, she walked towards the sad, pretty lady. the shiny red shoes carrying her on their most important journey yet. She reached out a small, trembling hand and gently tugged on the woman's elegant gelly. "Excuse me, mummy," she whispered, her voice raspy from unshed tears. The face in the crowd. The woman at the jewelry kiosk was named Amara Adeyemi, and she was contemplating a necklace of cold, perfect pearls. They lay against the black velvet like a string of captive moons, beautiful, expensive, and utterly meaningless. She traced one with a manicured fingertip, not feeling the smoothness. Her mind was elsewhere, in the penthouse on Victoria Island where silence was a weapon and a raised voice was a prelude to pain. The call from her husband had come an hour ago. A hissed litany of complaints about a late dinner reservation, about her poor management of the chef, about the money she'd spent. The words were familiar, but the threat beneath them, as always, was fresh. The faint, throbbing ache near her temple, carefully concealed under her foundation, was a reminder of the last slightest mistake. The pearls blurred before her eyes. This was the life she'd chosen. This was the glittering cage. A gentle tug on her gelly. She started, pulled from her bleak reverie. She looked down, expecting a vendor's child or a beggar. What she saw instead made the breath catch in her throat. A little girl, perhaps 3 or 4, dressed in a smart denim pinafore, her hair a beautiful cascade of intricate braids and tiny beads. Her eyes, wide and swimming with unshed tears, were a deep, liquid brown. Her face was smudged with the tracks of earlier crying, and in her hand, she clutched a shopping bag like a lifeline. But it was not the girl's evident distress that froze Amara. It was her face. It was like looking into a warped, tender mirror of the past. The shape of the brows, the full curve of the lips, there was an echo of Cola there, in the strong chin, but the rest was a hauntingly familiar ghost. Her ghost. "Excuse me, mummy." The voice was small, raspy, but polite. The words, "mummy," spoken with such instinctive, desperate trust, pierced Amara's carefully constructed numbness like a needle. She knelt. It was an automatic gesture, her expensive linen trousers brushing the mall floor. At eye level, the resemblance was even more profound, more unsettling. The child smelled of baby powder and a hint of chocolate. "Hello, little one," Amara said, and her own voice sounded strange to her, softer than it had been in years. "Are you lost?" The little girl nodded, a single, solemn movement. A fresh tear escaped and traced a path through the dust on her cheek. "I can't find my daddy." She took a shaky breath. "Do you see him? He is tall, and he has a mark on his chin like this." She drew a faint line on her own small, perfect chin with a tiny finger. In that sliver of a moment, the universe pivoted. Zara, still holding her shoe bag, watched the two men talk. She was used to people greeting her daddy. But then, a flash of electric blue and a giggle from across the wide corridor caught her eye. It was the giant, animatronic teddy bear from the toy store window. It was moving. Its head was nodding, its big plastic paw waving slowly back and forth. A group of children were clustered around it, laughing. It was the most fascinating thing she had seen all day. More fascinating than ladybug shoes. More fascinating than sprinkles. She took one step backward, her gaze locked on the bear. Then another. The tap-tap of her new shoes was lost in the mall's ambient noise. She didn't mean to go far, just to see the bear properly. Just for a second, while Daddy finished his talking. She took 3, 4, 5 steps back, until she was at the periphery of the small crowd watching the display. The bear's mechanical movements were enchanting. She forgot about the ice cream debate, about the hand that was no longer holding hers. She was adrift in a moment of pure wonder. When the bear's cycle ended and it stilled, she blinked. The spell broke. She turned, a smile still on her face, ready to tell Daddy about the waving bear. But the spot where he had been standing was empty. In its place was a river of strangers, trousers, skirts, shopping bags, strollers. A tall man in a white Igbata passed, blocking her view. A group of chattering teenagers swept by. Her smile faded. "Daddy." Her voice was small. A pebble dropped into a roaring ocean of sound. She took a step forward, then another, towards where she thought he was. But the landmarks had shifted. The glittering jewelry kiosk looked like all the other glittering kiosks. The path to the fountain was no longer clear. A cold, unfamiliar sensation began in her tummy, a fluttering panic that tightened her throat. She spun in a slow circle, her new shoes suddenly heavy. The friendly, colorful mall transformed. The lights were too bright. The noises were too loud. The faces were all wrong. "Daddy," she called again, louder this time, a thread of fear weaving into the word. But Kola, his back turned, was laughing weakly at Mr. Bellow's story, one ear listening, the other already tuning into a silent, internal alarm that was just a second too late in sounding. He was still anchored in a past conversation, unaware that his future, in shiny red shoes, had already drifted out of reach, carried away on a current of wonder and swallowed by the indifferent sea of the crowd. The turn back had become a chasm. Silent scream. For Kola, the moment arrived not with a bang, but with a hollow, silent pop in the center of his universe. Mr. Bello was mid-sentence, reminiscing about a long-ago office party, when Kola's left hand, hanging loosely at his side, made an involuntary grasping motion. It closed on empty, cool air. The sensation was a physical electric shock. His head snapped down. The polished marble floor, where Zara's small, shiny red shoes should have been, was just a reflection of the ceiling lights. "Zara." His voice was a question, calm at first, expecting her to be right behind his leg, investigating a fallen coin. He took a quick step back, his eyes darting around their immediate vicinity, behind Mr. Bellow's bulk, near the potted plant, by the bench. "Nothing." Mr. Bellow faltered. "What'n?" Kola didn't hear him. The ambient sounds of the mall, the music, the chatter, the distant beep of scanners, seemed to warp, stretching and thinning into a high-pitched whine. His vision tunneled. He took another step, then another, his movements jerky. "Zara?" "Omomi." A woman with a stroller passed, giving him a curious look. A child, but not his child. The hollow feeling in his chest expanded, pushing out his breath, his reason. The calm question evaporated. "Zara." Her name tore from his throat, a raw, primal sound that sliced through the polite mall atmosphere. It was not a call. It was a scream made of pure terror. Heads turned. Conversations halted. Mr. Bellow's jovial face crumpled into alarm. "Kola." "My friend, what had happened?" "The Pekin." But Kola was already gone, a man unmoored. The confident landlord, the shrewd businessman, was obliterated. In his place was the ghost from the one-room apartment, the one who knew loss intimately, its taste bitter on his tongue. This loss would be unendurable. This loss would be death. "Zara. Zara Adesina." He bellowed, shoving past a cluster of teenagers, his eyes wild, scanning the crowd for a denim pinafore, a head of beaded braids. The shiny floors, the cheerful storefronts, the whole glittering monument to his success became a labyrinth of horrors. Every corner hid a threat. Every stranger's face was a mask of potential menace. He ran. He didn't know where. He sprinted back towards Bada, his heart hammering a frantic, sickening rhythm against his ribs. Had she gone back for another look at the shoes? He crashed through the entrance, ignoring the greeting of a sales attendant. "My daughter." A little girl, red shoes, braids. The attendant's eyes widened. "I know CM, sir." He whirled around and ran out, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The fountain. She liked the fountain. He careened towards the center of the atrium, knocking into a man's shoulder, a mumbled apology lost in his panic. He reached the fountain's edge, water still dancing merrily. "No, Zara. Have you seen my daughter?" he demanded of a woman taking a photo. She jumped, shaking her head, her smile vanishing. The panic was now a live wire, electrocuting every nerve. Visions, monstrous and vivid, flashed behind his eyes. Zara being led away by a smiling stranger. Zara trapped in a dark service elevator. Zara crying, lost and alone in a stockroom. Zara gone. The word echoed, a final, crushing verdict. Gone. Gone like her mother. Everything you love leaves. A cold sweat broke out on his brow. His palms were slick. He fumbled for his phone, his fingers thick and clumsy. He had to call security. He had to. His hands shook so violently he almost dropped it. Just then, a firm hand clamped on his arm. He flinched, ready to fight. It was Mr. Bello, his face ashen. "Kola, I don't alert security. Dem day come now. We must organize." But organization was a language Kola's brain could no longer speak. He was pure, animal instinct. He pulled his arm free. "She can't be far. She can't be." He took off again, this time towards the food court, a place of crowds and chaos. "Zara, baby, where are you?" His voice was breaking, hoarse with desperation. He accosted a mall cleaner. My daughter. Small girl. Have you seen her? The man stared, bewildered, holding his mop like a shield. The happy melody of their morning was a cruel, distant echo. The ice cream promise was now a taunt. Every second that ticked by was a grain of sand in an hourglass emptying onto a permanent, desolate shore. The foundation of his rebuilt world. The joy, the security, the hard-won peace. Cracked with an audible splintering he felt in his soul. The silent scream that had begun in his chest was now tearing its way out, raw and unstoppable, a father's heart shattering in real time in the middle of the shining, indifferent mall. Amara's heart gave a violent, painful thud. A mark on the chin. Kola had a small, vertical scar from a childhood fight. She knew it intimately. Her mouth went dry. The little girl was still speaking, her words tumbling out in a worried rush. Then she delivered the second blow, innocent and utterly devastating. You look like my daddy. You look like my daddy. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The mall's lights swam. The chatter faded. Those 5 words, spoken with a child's flawless logic, unraveled for years of pretense in an instant. This wasn't just any lost child. This was a piece of her own history, walking and breathing and looking at her with Kola's gentle eyes in her own face. A torrent of emotions, guilt, sharp and acidic, regret, a yawning chasm, and a terrifying, fierce longing crashed over Amara. She had to be sure. She had to ask, "What's your name, sweetheart?" She managed, the words thick in her throat. The little girl looked up at her, those familiar eyes full of a hope that Amara felt utterly unworthy of. Zara, she said. Zara. The name Kola had chosen. The name she had agreed to in a moment of fleeting tenderness, before the fear and the resentment had fully claimed her. The sound of it, on this child's lips, was a physical blow. The ghost had a name. The ghost was real, and she was lost, and she had walked up to her. Amara's hands, which had been resting on her knees, began to tremble. She looked at Zara, really looked, and saw the living, breathing consequence of her choice. Not a concept, not a regret, but a person. A beautiful, scared little person who had, by some cruel or miraculous twist of fate, sought her out. The cold pearls, the abusive husband, the empty penthouse, all of it receded into a distant, gray fog. Here, in the present, was a single, urgent reality: Kola's daughter. Her daughter was lost and was trusting her. The kind face Zara had been searching for was now a mask of profound inner turmoil. But the instinct to help, a maternal instinct she had buried and believed dead, stirred achingly to life. This child, her child, needed her. Not the rich Mrs. Adeyemi, but a mummy. And for this moment, she could be that. She forced a calm she didn't feel into her voice. Okay, Zara, she said, the name feeling both foreign and sacred on her tongue. I will help you. The ghost at the kiosk. Kneeling on the cold mall floor, Amara felt the world contract to the space between her and this little girl, Zara. The name echoed in the hollow chambers of her heart, a place she kept boarded up. The child's small, warm hand was now in hers, a shocking, living connection to a past she had desperately tried to outrun. As she led Zara gently away from the glittering kiosk, each step was a walk through a personal ghost story. The girl's hand was so trusting, her fingers curling around Amara's with an unthinking faith that felt like a brand. Every detail of her was a meticulously crafted accusation. The precise way her eyebrows lifted in worry, just like Kola's. The delicate shape of her earlobes, exactly like her own. The confident set of her small shoulders, even in fear. That was all Kola's doing. This was the child of the man she'd left in a hot, airless room. This was the life she had deemed unworthy of her dreams. And what dreams they had become. Mrs. Amara Adeyemi. The name was a title of acquisition, not affection. Her husband, Tunde Adeyemi, was everything she thought she wanted: a man with a fleet of cars, a name in the society pages, the power to make things happen with a phone call. He had also turned out to be a man with a volcanic temper and a belief that his wealth purchased total dominion, including the right to punish. The scar under her foundation, the careful way she moved to avoid sudden gestures, the hollow dread that accompanied the sound of his key in the door. This was the reality of her big life. She had traded Kola's desperate, pleading love for Tun's cold, controlling ownership. She had traded a struggling future for a gilded, miserable present. The regret was a constant companion, sharper than any hunger she'd ever known in Surrelir. She had thought of Zara often, with a pang she quickly suppressed. She imagined her scrawny, poorly dressed, a shadow of the vibrant child she might have been. She used that imagined image to justify her choice. She is better off without me. I would have only held her back. But this child holding her hand was no shadow. Zara was vibrant, articulate, beautifully dressed. She had a light in her eyes that spoke of security, of love, of being cherished. The evidence was in the quality of her clothes, the intricate artistry of her braids, the very cadence of her speech. Kola had not just survived, he had thrived. And he had done it with their daughter. The realization was a cocktail of shame, bitter envy, and a startling, fierce pride she had no right to feel. He did it. He really did it. Your daddy. Amara heard herself ask, her voice carefully neutral as they walked. He brought you shopping? Yes, Mummy, Zara said, her earlier tears drying. We bought ladybug shoes. See, she held up the bata bag as proof. He promised me ice cream with 2 sprinkles after. 2 sprinkles. The simple, negotiated joy of it was a world away from the stifling, silent meals in her own home. Amara's throat tightened. That sounds nice. He's the best daddy, Zara stated, a simple, incontrovertible fact of her universe. The words were a dagger, exquisitely crafted and perfectly aimed. Amara managed a nod, unable to speak. She was a ghost haunting the periphery of this perfect scene, a specter of the path not taken. She was the yay girl Mr. Bello had mentioned, the one who had run away. And now, here she was, holding the result of her abandonment, being shown in heartbreaking detail exactly what she had forfeited. She glanced down at Zara, who was looking up at her with a curious, open expression. You smell nice, Mummy, Zara offered, a child's peace offering. Amara's expensive French perfume, another marker of the chasm between them. Thank you, she whispered. They were approaching the busy checkout area, a nexus of queues and beeping scanners. Amara's mind was a riot. Part of her, the wounded, proud part, wanted to hand Zara to a uniformed security guard and vanish. To flee from this walking, talking judgment. But a stronger, more ancient part, the part that had carried this child for 9 months, the part that had heard her first cry, held firm. This was her penance. To ensure this piece of her soul, this child she had no claim to, was safe. To see, with her own eyes, the man she had left behind reclaim his daughter. We will wait here, Amara said, her voice gaining a little strength. She found a slightly less crowded spot near a pillar, within clear view of the main thoroughfare. Your daddy will come to the payment points to look for you. This is where everyone ends up. She knelt again, ostensibly to adjust Zara's pinafore strap, but really to be at her level one more time. To memorize the feel of her small, warm shoulder under her hand, the exact shade of her skin, the faint dusting of freckles across her nose that were entirely her own. In this moment, Amara was not the abused wife of a rich man. She was not the social climber. She was a ghost mother, granted a few stolen minutes with the daughter she had let go. And as she waited for the past to walk around the corner, the ghost finally felt the full, crushing weight of being dead to the one life that had truly mattered. The walk to yesterday. The walk from the jewelry kiosk to the checkout area was the longest and shortest journey of Amara's life. It spanned only 100 meters of polished floor, but it traversed 4 years of regret, a lifetime of wrong choices. Zara's small, trusting hand was a lifeline tethering Amara to a present moment so saturated with the past it felt like drowning in clear water. Every few steps, Zara would look up, her eyes, his eyes, so gentle and questioning, searching Amara's face. Do you think he's here yet? Not yet, but soon. Amara would reply, each word a carefully balanced stone in the chasm of her guilt. Her own voice sounded alien to her, softer, stripped of the defensive sharpness she used as armor in her marriage. She was hyper-aware of everything. The cheerful squeak of Zara's new red shoes. The confident way the girl navigated the crowd, clearly used to being led, being protected. The bata bag, clutched like a treasure. These were not the markers of a child who had lacked. They were badges of a childhood curated with love and attention. Kola's love, Kola's attention. Amara's mind flashed back to the only memory she allowed herself of him as a father. His large, rough hands cradling the newborn Zara with a tenderness that had made her own heart ache with a confusing mix of love and resentment. She had dismissed that tenderness then as a weakness, a distraction from the brutal calculus of survival. Now, seeing its result walking beside her, she understood it for what it was, a profound strength. "My daddy works with boats," Zara announced, swinging their clasped hands slightly. "Boats?" Amara asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Hmm. Big ones on the lagoon. He says they sing when the wind blows." Zara said it with the matter-of-factness of a child describing a fundamental law of the universe. "Sometimes he takes me to see them." A vision assaulted Amara. Kola, in simpler clothes than he wore now, holding a toddler Zara on the rails of a dredger, pointing at the horizon, the wind in their hair. A life of simple, tangible triumphs. A life she could have shared. The envy this time was not for his potential wealth, but for his peace, for the singing boats and the wind. They passed a bakery, the smell of warm sugar and yeast wafting out. Zara didn't ask for anything. She simply took a deep, appreciative sniff. "Ani Chitty makes better puff puff," she stated loyally, referring to a nanny Amara didn't know. Ani Chitty, another piece of the puzzle. A support system. A village. Kola had built a village for their daughter, where she had aunties and routines and opinions on puff puff. Amara's own life in the penthouse was a stark, silent monument to isolation. As they neared the bustling checkout lanes, the noise level rose, the beep of scanners, the rustle of bags, the chatter of transactions. Amara guided them to a spot by a pillar, a slight remove from the main flow. "Here," she said, "we can see everything from here." She knelt again, ostensibly to check that Zara's shoelaces were tied, but it was another excuse for proximity. This close, she could see the tiny, almost invisible scar on Zara's knee, a childhood scrape. She could see the delicate pattern of veins on her temples. This was a living, breathing person, with a history of 4 years that Amara knew nothing about. First steps, first words, first fears, all witnessed by other people. The loss was no longer abstract. It was a vast, empty library of missed moments, and the weight of it threatened to crush her. Zara, oblivious to the tempest inside the woman she called Mummy, leaned against Amara's side, a gesture of unthinking comfort. The warmth of her small body was in agony. Amara fought the urge to wrap her arms around her, to bury her face in those beaded braids and weep. She had no right. She had forfeited all rights. So she remained still, a statue of composed anguish, one hand resting lightly on Zara's back, feeling the steady rhythm of her breathing. She was performing the last motherly act she ever would, delivering this precious child back to the parent who had earned her. The walk was over. Now, she had to face the architect of the life she had foolishly abandoned and witness the reunion that would forever seal her fate as a ghost in their story. She was walking Zara back to her father, and in doing so, she was walking herself to the gallows of her own regret. The collision of worlds. Kola's world had become a fractured kaleidoscope of panic. He'd covered the food court, the toy store, the cinema arcade. He'd run past the giant teddy bear, now a mocking monument to distraction. His voice was a ragged, hoarse thing, scraping his throat raw. "Zara, Zara." Security guards, now mobilized with walkie-talkies crackling, moved with methodical urgency, but their calm efficiency felt like an insult to his chaos. Mr. Bello puffed beside him, a loyal but helpless shadow. Every second was a drop of acid on his soul. The visions were no longer possibilities. They were certainties playing behind his eyes on a hellish loop. Then, a guard's voice crackled. "Check the main checkout area. All points, converge near ShopRite." It was procedure, the logical place. But logic had burned up in Kola an hour ago. He ran anyway, a man propelled by the last dregs of hope, a drowning man swimming towards a whispered rumor of air. The checkout area was a symphony of concluded journeys. Shoppers laden with bags, children whining for treats they'd already been promised, the relentless beep 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 of transactions. It was a place of endings, and Kola's heart screamed that he could not let it be the end of his. He skidded to a halt near the central queue, his eyes, red-rimmed and wild, scanning, past trolleys, past bored cashiers, past 100 indifferent faces. Then he saw her, a flash of denim pinafore, a head of beaded braids, the small, proud bata bag. She was standing by a pillar, whole, alive, unharmed. The relief that surged through him was so profound, so physical, it buckled his knees. A sob wrenched itself from his chest, a sound of pure, unadulterated deliverance. Zara, he didn't see the woman beside her at first. His entire being was a homing beacon locked on his daughter. He sprinted the last few yards, dropping to his knees on the hard floor with a force that sent a jolt of pain through his bones, but he didn't feel it. He swept her into his arms, crushing her against his chest, burying his face in her hair. He was trembling violently. Omo me, Omo me. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you. Zara, startled at first, quickly melted into the familiar embrace, her own small arms wrapping tightly around his neck. Daddy, you found me. You found me. He choked out, pulling back to cup her face, his thumbs wiping at the dried tear tracks, needing the tactile proof she was real. Are you okay? Did anyone touch you? Are you hurt? The questions tumbled out, his eyes drinking in every detail of her, searching for any sign of harm. I'm okay, she said, her own eyes wide at the intensity of his emotion. The nice mummy helped me. She gestured beside them. Only then did Kola look up. His gaze, still blurred with tears of relief, followed Zara's small pointing finger. The world, which had just snapped back into glorious, focused clarity, shattered again. But this time it froze. Time did not fold so much as it evaporated. The noise of the mall, the beeping, the chatter, it all drained away into a high-pitched silence. The air left his lungs. She was older. The softness of her 22-year-old face had been refined into a more defined, elegant beauty. She was dressed in expensive, understated linen, a silk gelly artfully tied. She wore the subtle, confident armor of wealth. But the eyes were the same. And in them, he saw a reflection of his own shock, magnified by a yawning depth of shame and a pain so raw it was unmistakable. For years vanished in the space between one heartbeat and the next. He was back in the hot room, hearing the click of the door. He was staring at the empty space where her suitcase had been. He was whispering promises to a newborn in the dark. Amara. Her name left his lips not as a question, but as a disbelieving incantation. It was the ghost from his most painful past, conjured in the flesh in the middle of his redeemed present, standing beside the living proof of all she had walked away from. He rose slowly to his feet, Zara instinctively clinging to him, her legs wrapping around his waist. He held her close, a protective, possessive gesture he wasn't even conscious of making. The raw gratitude of a moment ago curdled, hardening into a complex, icy stone in his gut. This was the woman who had left them to drown, and she was the one who had fished his daughter from the sea of strangers. The two worlds, the grinding struggle of then and the hard-won peace of now, the love he had nurtured and the love she had discarded, collided violently right there by the pillar. And in the wreckage, amidst the echoing silence, they simply stared at each other, two ghosts from each other's lives, with the breath of their shared child warm between them. The chasm, the silence that followed Kola's utterance of her name was a tangible thing, thick and charged like the air before a thunderstorm. The bustling checkout area seemed to recede, the sounds muffled as if heard from underwater. In that bubble of stunned quiet, a chasm opened, for years wide and filled with the ghosts of discarded futures. Amara stood frozen, her carefully composed facade crumbling under the weight of his gaze. She saw the journey in his eyes, the initial, blinding relief upon seeing Zara, the dawning shock of recognition, and now, a slow, hardening curtain of ice. This was not the broken, pleading man she had left. This was a man of substance, his shoulders squared not by desperation but by success, his eyes holding a calm, guarded authority that was far more intimidating than any rage. He held Zara as if she were the core of the earth, his arms a fortress. The sight was a physical ache in Amara's chest. Zara, sensing the strange tension, buried her face in her father's neck, then peeked back out at Amara. That's the mummy, Daddy. The one that helped me. Kola's jaw tightened. He forced his attention away from Amara's face, looking down at his daughter, his voice softening but retaining a formal stiffness. Did you thank her, Zara? Zara nodded, her beads clicking softly. I said thank you. She looked back at Amara, a sweet, conciliatory smile on her face. Thank you, Mummy. The word mummy in this context, so innocent and polite, hung in the air like a shard of glass. Amara flinched, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. She saw Cola's arm tighten around his daughter. "Thank you," Cola said, his voice returning to her. It was flat, correct, the gratitude rendered in the tone one might use with a helpful cashier or a passing stranger. It held no warmth, no thread of shared history. It was a wall, high and impenetrable. For helping her, Amara found her voice, but it was a frail, fractured thing. She walked up to me. She said I looked like you. A faint, pained attempt at a smile touched her lips and died. She's beautiful, Cola. The use of his name, after so long, seemed to startle them both. He gave a short, almost imperceptible nod, his eyes briefly scanning her, the expensive clothes, the subtle jewelry, the marks of the life she had chosen. There was no admiration in that glance, only a cold assessment. She had gotten what she wanted. The unspoken verdict hung between them, and I got what I needed. She is, he said simply, the words of final, unassailable truth. He was not going to discuss their daughter with her. He was not going to grant her even a glimpse into the life she had forfeited. The chasm was not to be bridged. It was to be acknowledged and then stepped away from. Mr. Bello and a security guard approached cautiously, breaking the spell. You don't find him." "Thank God," Mr. Bello exclaimed, his eyes darting curiously between Cola and the elegant, stricken-looking woman. "Yes," Cola said, not taking his eyes off Amara. "We're leaving now." It was a statement, not a suggestion. The reunion was over. The rescue was complete. There was nothing more to be said. He adjusted Zara on his hip, turning his body slightly, a physical closing of the circle around his child. The movement was a dismissal. He was walking away, back into the life he had built, a life that had no room for her ghost. Zara, over his shoulder, waved her small hand, her earlier distress forgotten in the safety of her father's arms. "Bye-bye, nice mummy. Thank you." That cheerful, innocent farewell was the final, exquisite torture. It was the sound of a door clicking shut from the other side. Amara's carefully maintained composure shattered. A single, traitorous tear escaped, tracing a path through her foundation before she could swipe it away. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. What could she say? "I'm sorry" was a pebble against the mountain of her abandonment. "I regret" it was a whisper in the hurricane of his success. She simply stood there, a beautiful, lonely statue in the middle of the flowing crowd, as Cola Adesina walked away with their daughter. He did not look back. He had everything he needed held close against his heart, and she was left with the echoing, hollow truth of Zara's words. "Nice mummy." Not my mummy, just a nice stranger who had helped for a moment. The chasm had been crossed, in a manner of speaking. He had crossed from despair to wholeness. She had merely peered over the edge from her gilded cage, seen the vibrant life flourishing in the valley below, and realized the distance was uncrossable. The help had been given, the child was safe, and her role in their story was now, definitively and forever, over. Gilded cages. Cola walked. He didn't run, didn't hurry. His steps were deliberate, solid on the mall floor, each one a reaffirmation of the ground beneath him. Zara's weight in his arms was the only reality. Her warmth, the soft press of her cheek against his neck, the faint, clean scent of her hair. He could feel the rapid, bird-like beat of her heart gradually slowing, syncing with the steady, fierce rhythm of his own. He didn't look back. Not once. To look back was to acknowledge the ghost, to give it power. To look back was to risk the cataclysm of the past breaking into the careful peace of his present. He focused on the exit ahead, a rectangle of hazy Lego sunlight, a portal back to their normal world. Mr. Bello chattered beside him, a stream of relieved commentary. "God is good. See how she just stay there, just like that. And that fine woman way help am. She just, Cola, wetin." "Thank you, sir," Cola interrupted, his voice firm, a door closing on that line of inquiry. "I need to get her home." He pushed through the glass doors, and the wall of humid heat was a shock after the mall's chill, but it was a familiar, honest shock. The honking chaos of the car park was a welcome symphony. He found his SUV, clicked the locks, and bundled Zara into her booster seat. His hands, which had trembled so violently an hour before, were now steady as he fastened the harness, checking and double-checking the buckle. He got into the driver's seat, closed the door, and for a long moment, simply sat there in the quiet capsule of the car, gripping the steering wheel. He took a deep, shuddering breath, then another, letting the reality of her safety seep into his bones. The fear began to recede, leaving behind a hollow, trembling exhaustion and a slowly crystallizing anger, not at Zara, never at her, but at the universe for the scare, and at the ghost now resurrected. "Daddy," Zara's small voice came from the back. "Are you still sad?" He turned to look at her. Her ladybug shoes kicked gently against the seat. Her face was serene, the adventure already transforming into a story in her mind. "No, my love," he said, his voice rough but gentle. "I'm not sad. I'm just so happy you are safe." He reached back, and she placed her small hand in his. "You remembered what I told you. You found a kind mummy." "She was very nice," Zara agreed. "And pretty. She looked like you." She said it again, the innocent, haunting observation. Kola just nodded, squeezing her hand before letting go to start the car. He didn't trust himself to speak. The image of Amara, the shock in her eyes, the shame, the expensive, unhappy drape of her clothes, was seared into his mind. He had seen it. The regret, the hollow victory. It gave him no pleasure. It only deepened the chasm, made the rightness of his own path more profound. As he navigated the traffic away from the Galleria, the promised land of ice cream forgotten for now, his world quietly reassembled itself around its central, unshakable truth. Zara, safe in the back, humming a tuneless song. Back inside the Galleria, Amara remained by the pillar. The cool air felt surgical, antiseptic. She watched the space where they had vanished, the crowd flowing to fill the void as if they had never been there. The ghost of Zara's touch still tingled on her hand. The echo of her voice, "Bye-bye, nice mummy," replayed on a loop, each iteration a fresh laceration. Nice mummy, the definitive verdict. She was a kindness from a stranger, a footnote in the little girl's Saturday adventure. She would be forgotten by dinner time, replaced by the drama of the lost and found story and the eventual, earned ice cream. Amara's gaze drifted across the mall, the glittering kiosks she could afford, the designer boutiques she frequented, the gourmet grocery where she bought overpriced ingredients for meals her husband would criticize. This was her kingdom, a kingdom of pristine surfaces and silent, spacious rooms where a slammed door was a thunderclap and a disapproving glance was a sentence. She thought of the way Kola had looked at her, not with hatred, not even with anger anymore, with a final, settled indifference that was far worse. She was a closed chapter, a problem from the past that had been resolved, definitively, by his own two hands. The weight of her gold bangles felt suddenly immense, like manacles. The silk of her gelly was a suffocating band. She had gotten everything she thought she wanted and had lost everything she never knew she needed. A salesgirl from the jewelry kiosk approached tentatively. "Madam, you still day look at the pearl necklace?" Amara turned. The pearls, once coveted, now looked like a string of calcified tears. She saw not elegance, but a chain. Not wealth, but confinement. "No," she said, her voice surprisingly clear, hollow as a bell. "No, thank you." She walked away, not towards the penthouse that awaited her, but through the mall, allowing herself to be carried by the current of families and happy couples. She was a ghost among them, moving through a life that was all glitter and no gold, in a gilded cage of her own meticulous design. The only real thing she had touched in years had just waved goodbye, calling her mummy with a heartbreaking, fleeting politeness. The cage door had been open for a moment, long enough for her to see the vast, vibrant sky of what she had thrown away, and then it had shut again, with a silence more deafening than any click of a door in a hot, lonely room. The blessings had been there, offered in the form of a struggling man's love and a newborn's cry. She had rejected them, and now, adorned in the expensive proof of her choice, she was utterly, terminally lost. Concluded, telling them to like and share with friends. Conclusion. This tale of a lost little girl in a Lagos mall reminds us of the powerful threads that bind families. Threads of love, sacrifice, and sometimes, the painful weight of regret. Cola's journey from a desperate father in a single room to a man anchored by his daughter's love shows that blessings often come disguised as challenges. Amara's story is a poignant reflection on the choices we make and the lives we leave behind in pursuit of a dream that may turn out to be empty. Life has a way of bringing our past and present face to face when we least expect it, revealing the true value of what we hold and what we've lost. If this story moved you, please like and share it with friends and family. Let's spread tales that remind us of what truly matters: love, responsibility, and the precious, irreplaceable gift of family. Open Book Red Heart. Share the story. Treasure your loved ones.